Redemption is a proud member of the RPG Academy Network, where if you're having fun, you're doing it right.
This is Redemption, an actual play podcast set in the Star Wars Edge of the Empire role-playing game system. Bonus episode, Season 1 Recap. As Season 2 approaches, the voice actors and guests wanted to give new listeners an overview of what happened in the 17 episodes that make up Season 1.
Welcome to the episode where we actually go through and talk about the previous episodes. We just ended Season 1. We're on our way to Season 2. And it's me, Chris, Mike, and we're joined by Jacob. He is actually going to be guest starring in the Season 2 opener. He played one of the members of the crew of the Harlequin. So welcome, Jacob.
Thank you.
And he's also been a listener, so he can kind of give you some recap from a listener's point of view. Chris, you got anything you want to say before, or should we just start talking about the episodes?
Let's just jump into it. Why wait?
I think we can kind of brush over episode 100 because it's pretty much a recap of what we did before we actually released the podcast.
Well, no, I think it's worth at least mentioning because it does get us to the point where we're at. And so basically, for those of you who haven't heard or did not listen to that particular episode, it's probably impossible for you to have because we recorded it and realized we couldn't release it. So
the audio was so bad.
The audio was horrible. We were recording it, the entire room on one microphone, and it was what you would call our initial outing into the podcasting world, and we quickly realized that our equipment was not up to the task.
We literally had one microphone in the middle of the table trying to get all of us, and there are times when you can hear us perfectly well, but if anybody even sat back a little bit, you lost all of their audio.
So I guess one question I have, I don't know if it was explained too much in detail, but how did you guys end up meeting?
The whole story started with Tazi landing on Tatooine, attempting to hunt down the Deveronian who had swindled his father out of their family freighter vessel, their family shipping vessel. In the process of trying to find Cantor, the Deveronian, Tazi got into a bit of a scrape in a bar and then ran into a Nautolan who was able to kind of fix up his wounds, was kind of a sympathetic soul, and the Nautolan, who ended up being the character of Ko, accompanied Tazi on Tatooine to try and find Cantor, to try and hunt him down. In the process of trying to locate Cantor, we also were told that there was a Twi'lek who may be able to help us locate and possibly even get into Cantor's ship. That Twi'lek happened to be Corell. And once we found Cantor, to be blunt, Tazi demanded that he sign over the deed, then put 2 laser blasts into his head area around the horn and forehead part. And then once we had the deed signed, we went back to claim the ship. When we got back to the ship, we then found that the ship was, let's just say it was chock full of beings.
And when you're talking Wookiees, that we're talking chock full.
Chock full.
Slave goodness.
Chock full of Wookiees, chock full of humans, chock full of Twi'leks, and then also as we found, Corell in particular had a hatred, a deep, dark, burning hatred for slaving and slavers. And upon her urging, we decided that it would be best to try and return these slaves to their homeworlds.
Well, I was a little upset that you guys killed Cantor without me, because that's the whole reason Corell was on Tatooine.
You were with us, but it was me and Cantor really. Ko kind of was at the back of the room. You were maybe watching the exit, like. I don't remember the particulars, but yes, Tazi did get to pull the trigger on Cantor.
Well, Corell felt better later when his cohorts got handed over bodily to the Wookiees, who like to pull arms off things, like Deveronian slavers. Mm-hmm. But that's also where we ran into 2 people in the human section of the cargo that would become big players later on in the episode.
You guys went to Ryloth. That's where you freed all the non-Wookiee slaves. And you guys then also bought some spice. You took the spice from Ryloth up to Lostbane, where you sold the spice on Lostbane to the cult. And
well, we didn't know they were a cult at the time. They were just very friendly and wanted to have dinner with us.
Which is where...
and drugged us.
They did drug us, which actually led to one of my favorite sessions of RP that we did. And I think that's, for me, when I realized we were going to make this a podcast, because the truth serum they gave us basically made us act like we were drunk.
Not all of us.
Not all of us. Corell, the former Jedi Padawan, was the first one to horribly fail the willpower roll.
Horribly.
Horribly. And
failed.
so she basically overshared a lot with Tazi and KO. That ended up being very funny. And then KO slept with a prostitute.
He did. He paid
Totally.
his debt, though.
That is true. When her gentleman friend called on the ship the next morning, he had money on hand, paid the man, shut the door in his face, and that was the end of that. Well, he wishes
It was not the end of that. We did ridicule KO mercilessly about that particular incident for a little while.
For a little while. Yes.
About 17 more episodes.
Yeah.
It comes up from time to time.
And then we ended up going to Kashyyyk to release the Wookiees. Once we left Lost Bane, though, we tried to drop the Wookiees off at Kashyyyk.
And you guys actually found out about the blockade. You guys went to the blockade, and there was a senator from Kashyyyk there. He actually asked you guys to go down to Trandosha using the illegal cargo that you had at the time as a way to get on planet. You already had some separatist credentials from Lost Bane. You guys could get down on the planet and kind of spy. And
Yeah,
it was
we just had to run a Republic blockade, which Tazi piloted us through quite ably. We faked shooting at some Republic ships and ended up on Trandosha
where you guys met Kratos, the head of the Bounty Hunters Guild.
and found out that the ship was known to him.
Yes, quite known to him. Kratos apparently had a bit of a relationship with Cantor. Not that kind of a relationship.
And Cantor owed him a lot of money.
A lot of money. We were able to work our way out of that particular situation with Kratos.
No. We're not letting you gloss over that, because when we met Kratos, he basically was very upset because Cantor owed him a lot of money. And he said, well, I'm taking the ship. And Tazi just straight up...
Tazi did man up.
Yeah, it was impressive. You just manned up and was like, I killed Cantor. What the hell are you going to do about it?
Well, the debt was with Cantor. That was I think Tazi's big thing. He's like, your debt was with him. Unfortunately, you didn't collect bore I killed him, and that's on you.
And it was very much a sucks to be you moment.
And luckily, the dice were with me on that one because I was not immediately disemboweled by his peoples.
Yes and no. They were and they weren't. Because actually, when you first said that, you were about to get out of the situation scot-free, but you did roll a despair, which is when then they recognized A1, which has then got you in a little bit of trouble.
True.
But you guys managed to get out of that. While you were on Trandosha, though, you guys did kind of poke your noses around and find that there were separatists on the planet.
Well, they had initially, I believe the Wookiees had asked us to try and retrieve the bodies of their fallen. And we quickly realized that was something that we were not going to be able to do.
And we, unfortunately, also while doing that, came across quite a big droid army on the planet.
True.
Which led to a brilliant moment of Corell getting hit very hard and deciding to force jump straight up in the air, not completely revealing that she's a force user.
To be fair, that was half my hit points. And Corell wanted to get the hell out of there. So, yes, that was an unintentional use of the Force.
Tazi did not notice as much as KO did.
KO pretty much knew at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, KO's character also coming into this had some prior experience with Force users and with Jedi, so he had seen those maneuvers before. Tazi did not realize what had happened in front of him, but that happens sometimes with Tazi.
That's true.
Not the first time
with
it
such
happened.
Big eyes, you miss a lot.
Not the first time it happened. Was not the last time. Will continue to not be the last time.
Although one of your good lines I remember, I don't know what episode, you can see sadness.
That's true.
But that we ended up going back up to the blockade, and that was pretty much the end of where we picked up on episode 1, because the Jedi did the interview with us.
That actually, I think, turned out really well because it gave people a real feeling for what the characters are and who they are. It was a little slow because it was completely improvised because I had no idea we were going to do it that way. So some of my questions were a little repetitive and a little slow, but I was trying to play a character who was trying to catch them in lies. There's the moment where I ask Corell, oh, so KO shot him. No, Tazi shot him. Oh, in the chest. No, in the head.
No, it plays a little bit like a clip show because of the way we bounce back and forth.
Yep.
But then also, I feel like we made the right decision on not re-recording that because, again, we've talked about this before off mic, and that re-recording some things, you lose a lot of that kind of spontaneity and that magic that you get from that recording session, from that around the table. This is happening right now. We're in the moment.
True. I think that is though something that we're probably going to rehash over and over again till our dying day.
Yeah, true.
Probably.
Because we all can see the different angles on it, but yeah, doing it like a clip show where we cut back and forth was a conscious idea of Chris's, and I think it worked out pretty well.
I would agree.
Yeah. And in that episode, the Jedi really did focus a lot. Well, didn't focus, but he keyed in on Rafe and Tassar because at the end of the episode, he actually asked the crew to go spy on Rafe and Tassar. He was really concerned about the potential that Tassar is some sort of dark force user.
I believe the Jedi is the person that keyed us into the fact that Rafe was actually a senator, not just like an old guy stowing away with his wife on a ship.
That she wasn't his wife either.
Yeah. We were a little...
He was keyed in on Tassar possibly being a dark side user, and the fact that Rafe is part of the Separatist movement. They wanted to know stuff, but they couldn't make it an official mission, so you guys were asked to go
Be
unofficially, unofficially go spy, but he also promised that the ship's name would be cleared.
Yeah, no, that was the beginning of our tumultuous relationship with Rafe and Tassar, and our... what was the best way to put this is our continuing adventures in being pawns of the Separatists.
Look at it this way: if we had let KO shoot the Wookiee Poodoo-eyed lady in episode 0, we wouldn't have had most entire season 1.
Oh, we would have. It just would have been a lot different.
That's true.
It would have been a lot different.
That's true.
Episode 102, the crew has left the blockade. They did decide to go towards Rusan. And KO decides to have a conversation with A1 because A1 didn't seem like he was connecting with the crew.
Well, this is kind of the episode where you meet A1 for the first time.
It is.
It really is. It really is.
I actually have a question for you, Chris. I mean, I know we're doing just a recap here, but did you mean A1 to be your character? Or was he kind of an NPC that we just adopted?
No, at this point, he was going to be a bad guy. And this conversation's what actually changed it because I flat out had A1 say, I like being a slaver. I like being a bad guy.
Yeah.
I like stealing. And KO going, well, we're going to do some of that, just not necessarily the slaving stuff. I kind of like you. And then he goes to Tazi and says, we like this guy. We should make him part of the crew. Then Tazi comes out and says, hey, you're part of the crew. You can do whatever you want.
KO is really the one that said, you can make your own choices. You're not a slave. You don't have a master.
Well, and that was kind of the kicker of the discussion because the back and forth between KO and A1 really revealed that A1 saw himself as a slave,
Right.
and that was a way for him to be in power was to take power over the slaves that they captured. So that's why he liked slaving because he felt like he had power and had choice and control.
It was just really lucky for him that Carell was not there for that conversation.
True.
He would have gotten spaced after the word, I like being a slaver. He would have just been, dropped off in hyperspace without a boat.
and now you guys are friends.
To a point.
Ish, friends-ish.
He amuses.
Admit it.
He does a lot of the work that I don't have to do. It's kind of nice. I just remember.
But there was a time when you were bitching about him doing all the work.
That's because you were asking him to do all the work.
think it was that episode,
We'll get to that episode. Will you please shut up and let the GM
Yeah,
talk?
I'm gonna get some golden drink. I'll be back.
You're wearing the suit. Just pull out the nipple.
Yeah. So then KO basically, in the conversation with
Episode
A1,
115.
in the conversation where Tazi basically says you can do
This
your own
stuff is
thing.
delicious.
Let's let him talk.
In that conversation, KO also did decide to give A1 the job of shopping and procuring items, which, as we all know, A1 is very...
Mistake.
So in that conversation, A1 was put in charge of shopping and procuring items, which we know he's very literal with how you guys give him descriptions. So the procuring items has come up later. But because he was told, hey, you can make your own choices, he decided to drop you guys out of hyperspace and actually change the course. So you guys dropped out of hyperspace over the planet Randon.
To the alarm of a lot of the crew.
Well,
Yeah. Pretty much the entire crew, except for A1, was like, why are we stopping? Why are we stopping? Everything's on fire. All the cool kids have gone.
That's true. There was a little panic. That led everybody to ask what's going on. And A1 confessed that Kratos could put some extra parts inside of him. Some parts that Kratos could actually control A1 and make him do things he didn't want to do. And at the same time, Kratos could spy on you guys. So A1, now being free, didn't want somebody else controlling him, so he wanted those parts out. Which, nice thing, the crew was nice enough to say, sure, let's go down there and do that.
I think the crew said, sure, let's go down there and do that, but we also had a long talk with A1 about, maybe communicating these things to us before he starts making decisions about where the ship is going and stopping and starting and those things.
As everyone will hear eventually, there's a lot of conversations that go around, A1, you should probably explain these things to us before you just go and do them.
Yeah.
Several.
Several.
Well, I mean, this episode had a lot of character interaction. I mean, it was a bottle episode because we were just on the ship. And it took place in almost in real time, to be completely honest.
It was a long day.
Yeah, so we ended up ending that episode as we headed down to Randon.
Shopping on Randon. Oh, that was interesting.
Episode 103.
Episode 103, our shopping episode.
We try not to shop all the time.
I think that was pretty much your only one.
So far.
Yeah, we've done most of our shopping on Stellar eBay.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, you guys went down, you got the parts you needed to fix A1, plus you guys decided to get the vocoder for A1.
And the buffer panel, the buffet panel.
The buffer panel. Yep, the primary buffer
and
panel.
let's be a little candid about the decision to get the vocoder. Doing sound effects for A1 was starting to get frustrating
Yes.
for our editor.
Yeah, because Chris would just talk it over and I'd have to edit it all out and then find different R2-D2 noises and put them together in unique ways. So I was actually creating a droid language somehow. That took a lot of time. So a vocoder was a very welcome change.
Now, granted, we programmed that vocoder with like 8 different voices, but I don't think we've ever heard a single one of them. But the single one that started.
Oh, you heard the Tazi one.
He did do a Tazi
but
voice.
that's like an impersonation, right? That's not.
Well, he also a couple times has slowed himself down to make a point when he thought nobody was listening.
Yeah, but that's not an actual different voice imprint.
Yeah, but he couldn't do it without the vocoder. I mean, I guess he could just beep, boop, 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 but
Anyway,
this is also in this episode you guys created Dave's Diner. That was actually neat for me as a game master because you guys said, "Hey, let's go to a bar." I had nothing planned, so I kind of threw it at you guys and said, "Cool, what's it look like?" Kind of like, "Oh, if you're going to make me think on my toes, I want to make you guys think on your toes." And you guys did it perfully. I just sat back and let you guys design Dave's Diner.
You guys got into it with the tubes that came down from the ceiling.
And we invented Frelp. Frelp is the awesomest drink there is. It was intended to actually
Frelp has electrolytes in it.
It does.
What plants crave.
That's what plants crave.
Frelp, when we originally did that, I was thinking Frelp was going to be golden drink, and then it ended up being basically orange juice. So
Well, the golden drink is, I believe, technically called a golden pod racer.
That's true. Yeah.
And we've just started calling it golden drink because
so if any fans actually want to stat up a real world golden pod racer golden drink, post that to our Twitter or Facebook. We'll give you a shout out.
So
if you post the recipe for golden pod racer and it looks interesting, I will try it.
I will too.
We'll get the reactions on audio for you.
Yeah. On your way back to the ship after you guys left Dave's Diner, that's where things kind of hit the fan a little bit for KO especially. Because as you guys were walking back, all of a sudden the planet got invaded by these 8-foot tall giant turtle human combination things called the Yin Curry.
Well, actually, he wanted to run away at first.
Absolutely.
He did
run.
No, KO did actually run away at that point.
He picked up A1 and was going to jet out of there.
Yeah.
He tried, but once you guys were running through the streets and you came upon the scene where the female security officer was trapped.
Does it matter that she's a female?
It did, because in the flashback that he had, he was a security officer assigned to a Padawan on his home planet, and she was trapped under a rock during the original Yin Curry invasion. He ran at that point. She died. He then had the same flashback and was scared and wanted to run again.
But we did not, so we started the fight, basically, instead of running.
Not only did you guys win that fight, but you also picked up the wounded security officer and took her back to your ship, which was kind of
And
nice.
then we all ran at that point.
You did, but first you had to fight your way off planet, which is where we see the ships that spin, and you guys had to defeat them.
Spinning turtle
You
ships.
know-
Yeah, we actually, they were totally homages to Gamera.
So once you guys got in orbit, that's when you guys actually looked and realized that the Inquiry were invading the whole planet. That leads us up to episode 104. As you guys were leaving the planet, the first thing you guys tried to do was look at nearby systems to see if there was a place you guys could drop the security officer on. Unfortunately, there was none that were really safe
Or nearby.
So you guys decided, well, I guess we're going to have to take her with us to Rusan. Couple reasons. One, Rusan is part of the Separatist movement, so is Randon, and you guys could also spy on Rafe and Tassar at the same time. Ko got a little paranoid about being around Tassar again.
No.
He's always paranoid.
Well, he's also convinced that she was going to kill him at that point, which I always thought was kind of interesting because you guys then asked Ko to call Rafe to set up the whole meeting, which he did, and it worked just fine. It did lead to a weird conversation, though, as you guys argued about, is there a comms panel in the gunnery pod or not?
And apparently Ko didn't know how to use the panel. Well, yeah, that was actually kind of a heated discussion between you guys.
We had to install one for him.
And that's become an ongoing joke,
KO
a
doesn't know how
running
to use the
joke.
yeah.
Not just KO, like one of us will often leave the comm button on, like leave our thumb on the button.
You guys did have KO call. He talked to Rafe. He explained about what happened on Randon. At the same time, Corel did fix A1, took out all the bad parts, put in the new good parts, and added a vocoder, which was nice because now we don't have to add the beeps in and I could actually talk. KO at the same time was developing his truth serum from the truth serum he got on Lost Bane, and you guys did fix up as much damage on the ship as you could. That then led us to a nice little scene where KO tries to talk to Corel about being force sensitive, and the force leap she did on Trandosha.
Drama ensues.
Well, I think that also was triggered because he knocked on her door at one point, and she accidentally force jumped out of bed because she was kind of surprised, and so there was a long discussion about that. Fortunately, Corel is kind of a private person, and at this point, the crew had been together 2 weeks,
Something
like that.
and she was very adamant that she wanted to keep her life private.
Yeah, well, he was worried that people like Tassar were going to try to twist you to their advantage. You didn't want to talk about it, and I shouldn't say you, but Corel stormed off to her room and slammed the door.
And that, I think, kind of started a little tension that lasted for a couple episodes between the whole group.
Oh, it was when we were recording. It was actually really interesting. I think this was at the end of one of our sessions because we record 2 to 3 episodes when we get together. And I remember going to bed that night and just was exhausted because we when we were playing it out, it was really tense in the room because we were really into character at that point, and we were almost at a couple points yelling at each other.
Yeah. Which actually led us to kind of the next scene that happened in this episode where I'm not sure exactly how it all came about, but Tazi falls asleep in the cockpit. And
Tazi falls asleep in the cockpit a lot. That's not
That's not
that surprising.
That's not
I believe
surprising.
A1 was kind of in charge of this subtext.
No, this part pretty much was KO and Corel because you guys decided to set off the proximity alarm to wake up Tazi, excuse me. That led A1 to go, hey, you guys like pranks. I'm now going to play a prank to win a little more favor. So once Tazi fell back asleep, A1 decides to put a bucket of water behind him. Tazi wakes up, puts his foot in the bucket, trips, falls into the gunnery pod.
Very Three Stooges.
Yeah, right on top of KO. Water gets all over. Some things get shorted out, which then led them to saying, well, Corel, we need you to fix it. And this then led to more drama because Corel was not able to fix what was wrong with it. She did install a comm button for him, but couldn't fix the turret.
There weren't many spare parts on the ship, and there was a problem with that. Unfortunately for Corel's temper, A1 decided and announced, I can fix that, and scavenged most of the parts from all of the doors on the ship to fix KO's gunnery pod. This irritated the heck out of Corel, and she ended up going back to her room and slamming the door manually, and led to a little bit of a scene where she pulled out her old lightsaber from her training days and was just kind of looking at it forlornly.
A1 was very specifically told by Tazi not to prank Corel, and A1 very specifically said, I won't prank Corel.
Well, and again, this whole situation is just fuel on the fire for Krell at that point. You know, they're between the conflict she'd already been experiencing with KO and her own feelings of kind of being left out of things on the ship and left out of, you know, the importance of her particular role. This whole process led to another door slam, or another attempted door slam. No, in fact, she did slam the door with her. I believe she used the force to slam the door.
Yep.
It was an assist.
It was an assist. And I think at that point, that's when Tazi attempted to try and have a conversation with Carell himself, which was not going well.
Carell was in kind of a bad place at that point, so Tazi got kind of a brush off, to be honest.
In the brush off, Tazi basically responded in kind, saying, well, you know, if this is how you're choosing to act, that's fine. You know, just understand that you're making the choices here at this point, and we're extending our hand somewhat. I wish I had more of the detail to that conversation, but again, that happened a long time ago.
That was pretty much it.
Yeah.
If you'd like to hear it, listen to the end of episode 104.
Not quite the end. The end actually,
Close to the end.
The end actually surprised Carell a lot because she was feeling pretty alone at that point, pretty left out, and wondering, you know, what she was doing. And suddenly, her former master appeared as a Force ghost and discussed a lot of things, trying to get her back on the path that she needed to be. And she needs to be a lot more introspective and spend more time meditating, because that's how the Force works. And that actually faded us out of episode 104 and sent us into 105.
Yep. You guys landed on Rusan. Mm-hmm. You were greeted by Rafe. He invited you guys to be guests at his personal home there in the capital. You guys all decided to go except A1. You guys told him he could do what he wanted to do, which we'll get to that later. You guys all.
This is again an example of the crew not thinking of A1 as a freewheeling, self-motivated droid who has his own ideas of what he can or should and shouldn't do.
Technically, KO told him to go shopping.
True.
Which is what he did, but we'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah.
While you guys sat down with Rafe, you guys did discuss the Yunkuri invasion. KO did tell everybody about the two different castes of Yunkuri. You have the warriors and the leaders, and he also informed everybody that they can cause fear, which you guys already
We experienced, yeah.
At that point, Carell had kind of gotten enough of the conversation to understand where it was going, and it was being rehashed. So she actually ducked out and met with Tassar. They spent a little bit of time talking about Force philosophies, for example. Carell was actually interested in finding out more information about a lightsaber crystal she had heard of that helps you control your emotions. And Tassar really wanted her to use her emotions to her advantage, not to deny the power of the emotions. Carell was basically brought up in the Jedi Temple, and she's like, this isn't how this works. Thanks anyway for the information, but I'll keep my own stuff. That's about the time we actually learned where Tassar and Rafe are not married, and Tassar's actually serving Rafe, right?
Yes, she is.
It also, I think, shows a nice little dichotomy. You have your old master, the Force Ghost, on one side, pushing you one way, Tassar pushing you the other way, and Carell really doesn't seem to want to follow either of them.
Carell wishes she could follow the Jedi path, but she doesn't have the control for it.
Right.
But she doesn't believe in what... Actually, the funny thing is she believes in what Tassar is saying, but rejects it because it's not what she's been taught. Yeah. We'll see what happens there in the future.
Which, wow.
I'm sure that won't come back up.
No, not at all.
Never. Not at all. While Carell was gone, that's when Tazi and KO realized she was gone. Tazi got a little confused as to why Carell might want to go talk to Tassar.
Again, this is Tazi being... He's observant, but not observant. Like, he picks up certain things, but certain things he seems to be oblivious to it. In this case, Tazi is very bad. Well, I'm not going to blame Tazi. I'm very bad with Rafe and Tassar. I can't tell you how many times I asked.
No. You've made a record. You've gone on record that Tazi is very bad with names.
Tazi is very bad with names,
and that's
true.
Just an outcropping of your own.
Thank you. It is that is a personal trait I've laid onto the character. Tazi doesn't quite get the whole Force piece of the puzzle here. He's never really been around Force users as a character, as he grew up, and the experiences he's had, he's never really had to deal with them. Even though the time frame we're playing in has Force users in it, the Great Purge has not yet happened.
Season 4.
Season 4. Those things are still foreign to him. So the fact that, KO sees this and KO is very concerned about this. Tazi's really kind of been oblivious to the force use that Corell has, her ability to kind of access it, and what it means for her as a person and as a character. So when Tazi, I should say, sees Corell trying to go meet with Tassar in private, like he knows that he gets the bad vibes off of Tassar, but he doesn't really get why KO is so worried about it.
Corell and Tassar do come back shortly after and join everybody, which once again makes KO a little nervous. KO does explain to everybody that the Incurie are basically there to invade, loot, and leave. They don't want to occupy anything, they just want to take what they want and leave. The crew was asked to stay. You guys were given nice rooms, you guys had no guards. Once Rafe and Tassar leave you guys, KO didn't want to have anything to do with being in the same room as Corell.
Drama ensues.
Oh, the drama came back, yeah.
Yep, and this is where Tazi called everybody back.
This did feel like much more cathartic conversation, though.
There was again, we talk about the tension of the recording of some of the previous episodes, and this was a really good way for us to kind of resolve some of that tension. Tazi ends up trying to play peacekeeper between Corell and KO, and also in the same time finds out just how badly he and his actions have also impacted Corell, and kind of, again, that obliviousness. He thought he was being the guy in the middle, and it turns out he was actually involved in this way more than he thought.
There was a big triangle of drama that the characters all had, and the players were aware of it, but until this, as you put it, this cathartic scene happened that basically took up the last half of the episode, we even didn't quite realize how much emotion there was involved in it, that how private Corell was, how angry that it made her to feel like she didn't have a place, that somebody else would take her place, and KO's paranoia about everything.
I think in that conversation, it came back down to, I think Tazi made a point of saying, if we're going to go so far out of our way to help A1, this droid that we literally just kind of welcomed into our group to try and be the thing that he wants to be, or to follow his path, what would make the character of Corell think that we wouldn't do the same thing for her? There was a lot of discussion around that point. We had some tears were shed.
There were some voices raised in anger. Tazi was accused of being an alcoholic.
Not far off the mark.
That's true. But I think at that point,
Tazi's a high functioning alcoholic for the most part.
Though I think at that point there was enough emotion that had been shed that people were calm, and there were some apologies. I mean, there wasn't hugs. It wasn't all hugs and kittens. But I think at that point we left it at a pretty good, we're going to try harder point.
You did. That's where the crew really decided who was going to do what jobs on the ship, who was going to be responsible for what. You guys also discussed building the med bay. Again, though, it was just KO, Corell, and Tazi. A1 was off doing his own thing, which then made Corell say, maybe we should see what A1's doing. And you guys called him. He said he was out shopping. And in that conversation, A1 did call Tazi captain, which made Tazi a little choked up.
The first time Tazi was called captain by anybody.
I will say, this episode highlighted one big thing for me as a player, and then also something as a listener of other podcasts. And we had talked about it a long time ago, was that we wanted to be able to tell a good story, and we didn't want it to get too rooted or too much into the comedy side of things. We wanted to tell a more serious tale in the Star Wars universe. And this episode, for me, highlighted the depth to which we would, as players, would go to interact as our characters. It's happened before, and it has happened again in later episodes, but the depths of the conversations and the depths of the interactions we'll take with the characters, to me, is another function of like trying to hit those points of making someone or giving someone the feeling that they're kind of listening like a fly on the wall to these discussions between these characters who exist in this world. They're not caricatures, they're not cartoon characters. Not everything is for, a slapstick effect, and there are very real consequences to the interactions we have together.
We wanted to do a show, not a comedy review.
Yeah.
And
True.
I think we've accomplished a lot.
And even as a gamer standpoint for myself, I think that kind of scene is such a necessary thing for gamers. Too often we just start playing together and you don't really know who your characters' backgrounds are and everything, and to really get it out like that, I think, is an important step to being a cohesive group.
Agreed.
And especially in this format, we talk about wanting to cover character arcs, and we've talked about that stuff off mic before, like how does this person's arc go and how does this person's arc resolve, this character's arc? And being able to kind of move in between these things while trying to tell a larger cohesive story. It is a challenge, but it's also very fulfilling. And like this episode specifically, episode 105, was one of those episodes where I left that recording session like, wow, we've got something. This is something that I would be happy to listen to.
I agree. And unfortunately, from a technical standpoint, episode 106 is a beginning of a low point for me. I do the editing and I take care of the sound. And we started experiencing these odd audio glitches, these little popping noises in the later part of episode 106, I believe. And they plagued us for a little while until
like 5 episodes.
I think 5 or 6 episodes until we replaced that piece of faulty equipment.
Again, the plus side to our long recording sessions is that we get a lot of material. The downside is that if something goes wrong, it's across a lot of material.
Yeah. So we ended up having one night that was bad of recording, but that gave us 6 episodes.
Yeah.
But talking about the episode itself, episode 106, we're still on planet.
Yep, you're still on planet. This is where you guys have just gotten up in the morning. There's a knock on the door, and there's a Deveronian woman and a droid who you guys all looked at as just some sort of protocol droid that's more boxy shaped and had red eyes. You guys later found out he was a general, which I was kind of surprised nobody asked more questions about a droid being a general. But long story
Separatists.
short, yeah,
Who can tell?
they basically wanted more information about the Yin Curry. And to get that, the Deveronian woman, who called herself Darla, she actually hypnotized KO, sending him back into the flashback again with the Padawan being destroyed or being killed. And that flashback actually got a little more in depth because that's when everybody identified that the Yin Curry, not only do they have the leaders and the warriors, but they have elite troops and shock troops, and within the warriors they have further ranks. They can be denoted by painting their faces.
This also is where we got a lot more of KO's backstory and the fact that, he was a security officer and he was assigned to this Padawan, and the Yin Curry basically killed this Padawan in front of him. And
The Yin Curry completely decimated the squad he was in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of backstory involved in that episode.
And that episode actually ended when KO decided to call A1 and see how he was doing. And that's when KO discovered that A1 did go shopping, but A1 forgot to ask for money. So he decided to go out and get money himself. And at the time, he was playing sabacc in a nightclub. And that nightclub, that scene kind of ended with a firefight/fight. So A1 was playing sabacc, and a fight broke out in the background. And the last that KO really heard on the comms was A1 saying to a female, "Jump on, I'll save you."
And then blaster fire, and that's where we ended the episode there.
That led us to episode 107, where everybody in the crew decides to come back to the ship. They come back to the ship, and there's A1. He meets you guys right at the landing platform.
He's covered in glitter and smells like vanilla perfume.
Well, I believe it was coconut perfume.
Yeah, it was coconut. It was
Okay.
coconut.
One of the two of you noticed that there was a
Either
coconut
it was,
smell.
what smells like coconut? Or it was, what smells like coconut?
It was Tazi.
What smells like coconut?
Yeah, it was Tazi.
Okay.
So Tazi noticed that there was a definite coconut smell, but you guys also noticed A1 had built himself a little box that he had himself plugged into, and all of a sudden he had energy level and everything was
That's
going
right. He was
twice as
tweaking.
fast.
Yeah.
A1 discovered tweaking.
Yes. So he was running around going all crazy, but all the parts to fix the ship were sitting there. He very specifically did not fix anything, which he was hoping would make Corell happy. Kind of, sort of, because I believe there was some grumbling about how much work she had to do, but
A little bit.
no complaining about the fact he did it. So he felt like he was off the hook.
Mm-hmm. And I think we talked a little bit more, as a crew, we talked about some of the things we had discussed in the
night
previous
before.
episode the night before. We didn't get into too much detail, I don't think, in that particular episode because we decided to kind of go out and, as a
Raise
group,
a little hell.
raise
Start
a little
trouble.
hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, we decided to go to the
qu-
bar.
Not yet, because KO tried to go back into one of the cargo holds, but A1 had a sign that said under construction.
That's right.
Oh, that's right.
That's
That
right.
led to a weird interaction because A1
secret.
kept saying, I have a surprise for you. And this is where we learned that KO really doesn't like surprises.
No, wait, no. We, as in Corell and Tazi, learned that a long time ago. A1 didn't quite catch that.
Not so much.
Not right away.
So eventually A1 does let KO into the cargo hold, where the surprise is A1 was building a med bay there for him. And he had
A table.
he had an exam table, but he also brought home we'll call her a model, to demonstrate to him how the table could
quote,
be used.
Patient, quote.
A patient, yes. She was dressed in a Catholic school outfit, as every good patient should be.
Working
dressed.
her way through college.
Yes.
Totally.
And KO escorted her out, found out her name was Sapphire. I do believe somewhere in this episode also is where A1 brought up the requisition forms.
I believe so.
Yeah, you made little badges of honor, and yeah.
Yeah, we also, there were, A1 handed out request forms, requisition forms for each of us based on our jobs and our titles.
Which, honestly, that was done by me to kind of break the tension a little bit at the table. I wanted to lighten the mood up and get some energy back. And it worked out really well because
We were definitely falling into Emo Valley. There was
A little bit.
Yes, we definitely had a good time with that episode because that even led, I believe it was Corell who said, I'm going to go leave to raise some hell. Who wants to go with me?
Not in so many words, but yes, it's.
I think it might have been those exact words.
I'm trying to recall the way this went down.
The idea was I wanted to. We had kind of left Rafe and Tassar, we wanted to get more information about them. We didn't know how to go about it. We figured, hey, let's go raise a little hell, get some attention, a spotlight shone on us,
That's right.
see how they react.
That's right.
So
That led to our first barroom brawl.
right. Well, A1 took you guys back to the bar where he was at the night before.
My favorite bar name ever, Clive's something.
That was
That's the
the.
name, Clive something.
Oh, and then Clive wouldn't let us into the back room unless Corell promised to dance for him.
Yeah,
Truth.
you
Truth.
kind of got a little slutty there for a second.
For a little bit,
No,
yeah. She's not.
no,
She's not good at it.
Not dirty. I wouldn't go even so far as to say
coquettish.
dirty. Yes.
Ooh, excellent.
Yes,
50 cents
she
for you,
was-
sir.
Corell was definitely taking advantage of her feminine wiles and the worldview that Twi'lek women are somewhat exotic in the Star Wars universe, and certainly used that to her advantage.
Which got us into the back room where, there's a little bit of a dance vibe. There was a stage, but there was a lot of gambling going on. KO decided to sit down and start winning at Sabak.
Well, he was trying to lose, wasn't he?
He tried to win. He tried to lose.
Yeah, he tried to lose. We failed at losing. Corell actually attempted to use the Force a couple times on the dice, and we ended up being like 32,000 credits up.
Yes, and
I believe that's when A1 and KO decided to cash out.
Yep.
did.
And then
They didn't like us cashing out.
Then the dance happened, which Corell started by swinging around a pole and kicking someone in the head, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think that was what actually started. I think the fight in combo started with
It was
the
Corell.
boys trying to leave with their money, and Corell.
She force tripped somebody who spilled drinks on the group.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
That's
And,
right.
So there was a big fight.
In all of our heads, we heard kung fu fighting play. It really was, except for Tazi, who was wandering around the edges of the fight, picking up drinks that were abandoned on tables and drinking.
But
He had
doing
another
that-
job.
Yeah,
He had an important job. He made sure the jukebox was playing the appropriate music.
he did.
True.
And if you will remember, Tazi was participating in the fight by drinking, hitting people with bottles, and then saying, "Hey, that guy swacked you. You should hit him back." And
Helping.
In the middle of this fight, you would see Tazi kind of looping through the room again, picking up drinks and doing his thing. Tazi was 100% loaded, 115 sheets to the wind by the time this fight was over.
And the fight was over when an unseen force basically divided the people in the room in half down the middle, like parting the Red Sea. And Tassar walked in and basically said, "You need to come with me."
Yep. And that's where the episode ended. But we picked right up from there on episode 108. The crew's brought back to the main Capitol building, taken to the top room, where his Rafe's personal office is. It's an office that overlooked the city, where the crew was questioned about the bar fight. Darla did offer to help you guys get over your anger issues.
What anger issues? I mean, seriously.
I got to say, as a listener, I never really figured out her role here. Is she just like a consort, or
She's a psychiatrist that just has hypnotism.
it always seemed like there was sexual overtones to everything she said.
She was trying to seduce and relax KO and hypnotize him and trying to use that.
It was very Freudian.
But there was supposed to be some sexual tension she was trying to create. But as you guys are being questioned about the bar fight, there was a press team that entered the room, began prepping everybody to be on camera. The crew
Reacted with some alarm.
and you guys did decline to be on camera, except A1. He was more than happy to be the face of the group. That was 3/4 vote no, and Rafe did agree to change plans and not have you guys on camera.
He lied.
He did, because he does do a speech about the Inquiry invasion and how it was an example of how the Senate wasn't being effective anymore, and the Separatists were helping, and how the Separatists were much better. Near the end of the speech, he had the camera shift over to where the crew was standing,
Saying how these upstanding citizens helped the people of Randon. Yeah, KO and I both jumped off camera as quickly as possible, and A1 and Tazi were standing there. A1 popped up his little rubber hand and was waving.
Yeah, and I believe Tazi toasted the camera, so to speak, with his drink, and everybody understood it was just a big PR stunt that Rafe was doing by trying to use the situation to his advantage.
Although this does start an important issue where Tazi really begins to feel like his ship's being exploited.
He should.
Which comes to a big head later on.
And then what happened next is after the press conference started winding down, the crew started noticing several Yunkuri ships entering the atmosphere.
Suddenly, Yunkuri attack.
Yep. Not only entering the atmosphere, but coming in running very hot, as we called it. In other words, they jumped out of hyperspace way too late, and some of the ships didn't quite make it. Some did. Mass planet-wide invasion again. The crew's told, hey, we're going to get you to your ship, but you have to take these underground tunnels with us, which Rafe and Tassar led them through. Unfortunately, they didn't make it out completely unmolested. In the tunnel, the group did have to encounter 4 Yunkuri, 3 with the special red painted faces, which we already knew were some type of shock trooper, and 1 that was wearing a helmet that was shaped like a skull and painted completely white. During that fight, we also noticed that Tassar, who had been carrying a staff, turned it on, and it became a lightsaber staff, which I do want to thank whoever it was that sent me a message and corrected me. I called it a force pike. It was not a force pike. That's something different. It's a saber staff or just a long-handled saber. I jumped to a term that I didn't know. During the fight, Tazi, this was not typical for Tazi in a fight, but he did take a critical hit and got knocked down.
Did you say it's not typical? Because I'm fairly sure it's pretty typical. It was not uncommon even through our most recent episodes that Tazi is the character that takes the brunt of the hits.
To be fair,
even with the advanced armor we've purchased for him and the weightlifting he's done in his cockpit between missions.
What weightlifting?
He's done a little.
He's done a little. He weighs 100 pounds now instead of 98.
Yeah.
To be fair, though, I mean, you took a critical hit, but so didn't everybody except KO, because I know Corell took a critical hit and A1.
Well, A1 saw what was about to happen because the Inquiry that knocked Tazi down was moving in to finish him off. And that's
A1 kind of did one of those little fast rolls in slow mo. No.
A1 thought he would be the savior, but all that really happened is A1 got hit hard enough that his leg got bent and had to be carried out of the battle.
We basically got out of that battle and climbed up onto the runway in time to start episode 109.
Which you guys realized you had to carry A1. Mm-hmm. So you guys decided you were going to try to get a speeder, but since you were at a spaceport, you guys had to settle for a slower.
We thought it was like a luggage carrier at an airport. We thought it was a speeder. Unfortunately, it went about 2 miles an hour.
Literally, KO carrying A1 could run faster than that vehicle could.
But he would have been tired and sweaty,
True.
so we stayed in the slower.
And he would have complained.
And across the airfield, there were a number of crow's nests, a number of stations set up by the defenders to try and use the equivalent of Star Wars AA guns to knock some of these spaceships out of the sky. Nearby the slower, as we were, trudging down the runway, puttering down the runway, one of those crow's nests was blown up, and 2 of the Rusan troops were thrown into the path of the slower, to which Tazi had to quickly react. Both of the troops were badly damaged. KO took a moment to kind of kneel down and try and treat one of them at least.
And then Tassar leaped down on top of the other one and then kind of used the force to heal that one and then looked at KO.
She gave KO the creepy Wookiee Poodoo eye.
This one was special Wookiee Voodoo
Yeah,
eye,
Wookiee
though,
Voodoo
because
eye.
the other eye had like this silvery iris sheen about it. It really freaked him out.
The eyes was a big thing for KO because he really locked on to one eye has a red ring, the other one has a silver ring. He didn't really know what to make of that. Also didn't really have time to think about it because you guys were still in a fight. Which you guys got to your ship. You knew you were
Eventually.
Yeah.
Yep. You guys You guys knew you were going to have to fight your way off planet.
Yeah, well, the hint was the Inquiry started setting up all these anti-ship weapons, so we're going to have to fight our way off the planet.
We decided to do what we did best, and that is strafing runs, which it turns out we actually do pretty well.
Until you roll a despair.
You know, sometimes
Like you do.
Sometimes the ship lists a little bit when it's turning.
It doesn't help that we got hit by a freaking proton torpedo
That
with
too.
2 critical hits.
That too.
You guys got hit with power fluctuations and you were knocked off course. It also didn't help that KO noticed a group of Yinkuri heading towards an orphanage and he had to go save the orphans.
Well, we hovered, and you did some amazing piloting over that orphanage to keep us from falling on the orphanage.
Yeah.
Although, didn't little Timmy's tree get blown up at one point?
Yeah, the treehouse did get exploded.
That's
I'm
true.
sure it did.
Yeah.
But because of the critical hits, Corell had to go help fix up the ship, which meant you only had one person on the guns. So A1 bravely decided he was going to try to help, but one leg didn't work.
Corell had to jam him in the gun pod.
Yeah, he had to slide himself on his belly to get back there. And Corell had to jam him up into the pod and get him up there shooting.
And that's when we noticed on the sensors that there was a group of ships that had entered the combat that no one had ever seen before. To the savvy Star Wars canon listener, these would be vulture droids.
And they decided to come in on the side of the Rusonians, and all of a sudden the Yinkuri started blowing up all around us.
And Rafe said, please land. These are prototype ships. We're not sure they won't shoot you by accident.
We landed
We landed quickly.
at that point. And that brings us to episode 110.
Back on planet, Rafe says, hey, you guys are welcome to stay. I'll help you fix your ship again. I'll help repair
We have
A1.
critical hits.
Yep. He did offer to throw you guys in back the tanks, which Tazi took.
did. Yep.
All of us took.
Tazi especially.
A1
Yep.
got an oil bath.
He did. He was happy.
Taz even has a little golden drink.
Golden drink snorkel.
exactly.
Yeah.
They snorkeled me in the golden drinks.
Yep. And as you guys were having the conversation with Rafe, Tassar rolled by on one of these super fast slowers. It had a Yinkuri on it that she had captured, and she did ask you guys if you wanted to help her interrogate, which you guys said no, thank you.
No, thank you.
You guys-
Initially.
We were hurting. I mean, everybody was bleeding at that point.
But yeah, you guys weren't really invested in what these Inquiry were doing here at that point.
That's true. We wanted to kind of just we wanted to get off
Yeah, you still
planet.
wanted to get out of there.
Yeah, there were a number of times the crew had actually discussed, like, we need to just get out of here. We need to just leave. And somehow, like, the best types of plot points, we just kept getting pulled back
Pulling you
in.
back in.
Yeah.
We ended up out of the back to tanks and healed, and then Rafe announced, "Hey, there's going to be a victory feast in your honor." Which then they kind of they grabbed Tazi's attention by giving him his own Keg 1 droid.
That thing was awesome.
It was full of golden drink, and he was in love with the droid. I'm pretty sure at that point.
And during
Imagine an astromech droid where the whole body of the astromech droid is hollowed out like a big keg.
And full of golden drink.
Well, I mean, any drink you would prefer, but Tazi prefers the golden drink.
Yep. And during the feast, Corell was asked by Tassar to come talk off to the side. She presented Corell with a box that had lightsaber instructions in it, and also said, "Hey, there might be a clue to you getting a crystal on Tula.
A very, very cold planet.
It has seasons, so it's not always freezing cold. Sometimes it's just cold."
Okay, have you met their people? I mean, they look like hairy Wookiees. Okay?
We're going to get to that point.
We'll get to that.
We're going to get there.
But the interesting thing about the lightsaber instructions was it was much more of a mechanical method. It would be like how a mechanic would build a lightsaber, not how what was taught in the Jedi at the academy. That Corell
Less
learned.
feeling your way through, more here are the blunt instructions on how to screw part A into tab B.
Yes.
Tighten the bolts, turn it on. Hopefully it doesn't blow up.
Anyway, and that episode actually ended by Rafe coming up and saying to the crew, "Why are the Inquiry chasing Corell?"
And one of my
dun.
well, then I had my normal episode closing comment of
Huh? That was a great little noise. One other thing you guys did invent was Turkleys.
Turkey legs. Oh, that's true.
Gobbler legs.
Gobbler legs, yeah. The victory feast was full of the equivalent of turkey legs, and we couldn't decide what space creature would do that. So they ended up being gobblers. I think is what we settled on. You wanted Turkleys, but we wrote that off as you being drunk. So we ended up.
I was actually drunk when we were recording. So
I liked
We can't tell. It's very in character for you.
But that was a great.
It's very method.
Yeah.
It's very method.
Tazi was drunk and falling asleep in his chair, and I think he called the
It's
keg
a lot
droid.
like being on the cockpit.
I think he called the keg droid A1 a couple times.
He did. He hugged it. It was awkward.
Yep. Tazi does indeed love that little keg one dread.
But that brought us to episode 111, where we had to find out what the heck Rafe was talking about.
Rafe basically told you guys that in his interrogation, or Tassar's interrogation, that the inquiry said they were chasing where they were chasing Corell, a Twi'lek that had Force abilities, which basically meant that Rafe was kind of outing her as a Force user Jedi, which I don't think at this point was a big secret to anybody.
Corell had never
Tazi knew really.
Corell had never actually admitted it though. So this was kind of a point where she just like, all right, I'll cop to it.
So I believe at that point that Corell and Ko wanted to get more information out of the inquiry. So you two went into the other room to interrogate along with Rafe and Tassar, which left Tazi and A1 in Rafe's office.
You were pretending to be much drunker than you were.
You were pretending to be asleep, and then A1 rolled in, and you opened your eyes, and he was staring at you.
Yeah, well, that's not uncommon. He does that in the cockpit all the time.
He does. He's
But what we did at that point was Tazi and A1 managed to break into Rafe's desk, albeit in quite a messy fashion. We were not very stealthy about it, unfortunately, and find a lot of documents related to the Separatists, the PR plan that they had tried to rope us into, the fact that the Separatists at that point had known about the Inquiry attacks.
There was a line in there that mentioned that Rafe knows how the war is going to end, which was kind of shocking because what war? But at the same time, Corell and Ko were downstairs interrogating the Inquiry. Ko quickly uses his truth serum because he doesn't want to waste time. We'll say he doesn't want to waste time. Through that conversation, they learned that basically the Inquiry are told who to go after, where they're at, and basically they just destroy everything in their path. They did, through some nice role-playing, convince the Inquiry to access one of the communication devices that they had. Ko then bluffed through a conversation with the Inquiry back on some sort of leadership planet.
He did a great Inquiry voice. Did you guys alter that at all? I just had to ask because
basically Chris and Nate both did the Inquiry voices. There's a little overlay, but they did a lot.
Yeah. Good.
That's when they learned that basically Ko was told, since he was pretending to be a Yin-Kuri, your next assignment's go to Kashyyyk, talk to the human wearing black outfit and a dark robe, I believe it was, and that's when they decided to go. Rafe does at that point ask Ko to call Jenny.
Because apparently she'd been calling everywhere looking for him, and he wasn't returning her calls on the
Ko
ship.
once again said no. Rafe does ask the crew to be allies. I believe the answer was no thank you.
That was a pretty unilateral no.
Yep, we did do some.
I had to tell him off several times too. He kept at it.
This was like one of the first times.
No, yeah, the tell off came a little bit later in the episode.
Yeah.
Because he initially asked us, and we're kind of like, no, we want to do our own thing. We're kind of trying to stay as neutral as possible. We've all got plans. We've all got things to do.
Yeah, it was actually Rafe and Darla that tried to convince you guys later to join.
That's when the actual tell off happened. Like the whole Tazi, I'm done being a pawn. I'm done being played by you guys. And that was kind of part one of that little rant, and it was to Rafe. That rant does come up later with a different person and ends quite differently.
Shortly.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's the point where, I mean, I think it's been pretty clear to even the listeners that, the crew had been at sometimes witting, at sometimes unwitting pawns in this game that Rafe was playing with the Separatists.
This is where we did some shopping for our soon-to-be trip to the cold weather planet of Tula, and picked up some new armor for everybody. Actually, everybody.
Tazi got a flight suit.
Yeah, everybody upgraded their armor at that point. Actually, so we did our shopping.
You had the Tassar and Corell did have another conversation. A little more specific about Tassar's views on the Jedi and their teaching. She believes that the Jedi are wrong, and that they shouldn't repress or suppress their emotions, that they should embrace them. And she tries to convince Corell that using her emotions is the right way of using the Force, because the Force is just the Force. It's how you use it that makes it good or evil.
which actually conflicted Corell a little bit because she can see that point of view. The Force is it's like a weapon. It's like a blaster. It's neither good nor evil. It's the intention of the user behind it. So she can kind of see that point, but the way of the emotions was very foreign to her, so she basically debated it, but they left it as agreeing to disagree at this point. I think Tassar was still, I have hope that you will eventually see the light.
She did, mostly because she also leaves you with one little piece of advice, which was, next time you see a Jedi, ask about the death of another Jedi at the hands of Darth Maul, which has never been explored.
No, it hasn't, but you guys all know what happened to that Jedi. That leads us to episode 112, where we leave Ruusan. Well, we start to leave Ruusan.
You guys left Ruusan.
We do start to leave Ruusan, and then it turns out that A1 has a surprise.
Well, Corell overheard him talking to people in the dining room.
That's right. A1 has a surprise for us.
Technically, it wasn't A1's surprise. A1 happened to hear something in the smuggling compartment. He happened to be talking to said person. Corell happened to hear it and happened to wander in.
And we found that
We found Sapphire
and her little daughter were stowed away on the ship. We didn't know she had a daughter, and we
in one of the few smuggling compartments on the ship.
Which Corell actually only knew about one of them at that point. And that was it.
True.
One of the 7.
I believe that conversation led to a pretty strict rule of A1 letting the crew know when people have come on board the ship that are not part of the crew.
He was blamed for it. He tried to say, hey, I was getting healed. They were fixing the ship. Somebody had to get in and out. Not my fault. Maybe you should blame the security officer.
We didn't have a security officer. That's when we decided to make KO the security officer.
True.
But what you guys also learned about Sapphire is...
I also took away his little overcharging box.
Yep.
He was not allowed to use that.
His punishment.
Yep.
But you guys learned that Sapphire's real name is Gianna and that her daughter's name is Tara. And actually, when Tara went to get out of the smuggler's compartment, she just jumped right up and out.
Force jumped.
We've seen that before.
Corell had a long discussion with Janna. It turns out that Tara's Force abilities manifested during a bit of a home invasion before, when her father was killed, and the young girl basically force pushed the guy who killed her father out the window of a 10-story apartment building, defenestrating him.
And that's when Tara decided she wasn't going to speak ever again.
Janna actually ended up becoming an exotic dancer named Sapphire to support Tara.
We arrived at the blockade, I believe, shortly after that, greeted by a new Jedi, a Chiss named Thal.
Yes.
Thal Sereno.
Which was odd and set off all of KO's paranoia detectors. We actually left him on the ship, so it was just us with Janna and Tara, and Corell looked and went, hey, look, a new Jedi. Hey, look, here's these people we found, and here's what happened on our mission, blah, 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 blah.
We did kind of open up to that.
Corell,
I'm just saying.
It's a Jedi. Corell trusts them.
I think at that point, the Jedi could have asked you any question. You guys were like, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I stole my dad's beer when I was younger.
Well, and to be fair, what came out later is Corell knew this Jedi.
A little bit.
But at the time, yeah, KO was...
Well, the Tara and Janna don't actually trust the Jedi, and they'd been told by someone that we find out later that they are evil, and we find out that was Tassar teaching them.
And the compromise was that everybody agreed that Tara and Janna would stay with Jenny, which Jenny felt really good about because she's doing something for KO.
And that brought us to episode 113, where we headed back to the ship and we told KO about everything that's going on. And KO blew up at us. We got a long speech about how we shouldn't tell everyone we meet everything we're doing and that we need to be more careful.
Occasionally. A1 was also asked to slice into the capital ship's computer because you guys were curious about what happened to Master Reyes, the original Jedi. You guys found out that he disappeared the day after you guys left the blockade the first time. Turned out that somebody sliced into the computer, turned off all the systems, an escape pod was jettisoned, and nobody knows where that escape pod went.
Nobody asked about it after that.
Well, we came to this, we figured out that
Look, you know what? We can't follow up on every story point every time they come up. We have to leave things we can go back to.
Yeah. And to be fair, that we worked it out, and through, figuring things out, Occam's razor, that
science.
The pod must have been picked up. Yeah, science. The pod must have been picked up, and the only ship in the area was one called the Domino.
Well, you guys put that together because A1 said...
A1, yeah,
I've worked with the Domino before, and we have, I believe he said something along the lines of procured items by going out an escape pod.
This was our modus operandi. We did this exact same thing, and this is what may have happened to this guy.
Yep. So that's how we kind of drew those lines together.
from there, you guys decided to go right down to Kashyyyk.
Well, at that point, people are sending the inquiry after me to kill me. I want to know why, and the dude who knew was on Kashyyyk,
You hoped. You guys could not get directly to the cave. You had to get some speeders.
which we accidentally stole.
A1 was so proud.
Inadvertently took without paying for, I
That-
believe was Tazi's description.
That's true. We called back,
Inadvertently took without paying for it.
but we called and had A1 wire the rental company some money, which he did.
Did we confirm that he actually did that?
No, you did not.
We trusted. We should have verified, but we trusted.
Don't go back to Kashyyyk.
We did
We're
find-
heroes and criminals.
We finally found the cave, which led to we decided to hide the speeders, which went wonderfully for Corel, who rolled a triumph. Unfortunately, she had used every bit of brush and concealment capability in the area, leaving Tazi and Ko with a stick each to place on the seats of their slurs.
Tazi had 3 leaves, a rock, and 2 sticks.
He thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, you were pretty proud. Ko just had the one stick. So.
He made a little smiley face on the seat of the speeder. It was pretty cool.
We ended up going into this cave because that's where it led us. Mm-hmm. There was this
Blindly into a cave. That's never been bad for anyone.
and there was a lot of discussion about how bad this of an idea this was. Ko, of course, leading the paranoid parade again.
No, never.
Well, then there was that big thing. We got attacked. There was this
That big thing.
KO heard a rancor.
Well, we didn't. It wasn't a rancor. It looked like
Said it
one.
sounded like a rancor.
Yeah, it's a Terrantech is how you believe you say it. It's similar to a Rancor. It's got some
Angrier.
a little angrier. It's got some different looks to it, but
And I believe in Star Wars canon, they absolutely hate Force users.
they do.
They do. Which meant it came charging right at us. But Corel had actually been kind of stealthing, so it actually came charging right at Ko.
Actually, I believe it. Did it go after K or did it go after everybody else's favorite target?
Little column A, little column B.
No,
I believe
KO.
I believe it went after KO first.
did.
Because you then froze up right
Oh
behind
yeah.
Ko.
Yeah.
KO took a bite out of it. Corel came up behind it and smacked it with her staff.
I think if I remember, you guys took it pretty handily for its
was-
size.
Yeah, the next round, KO shot it again. Corel clubbed it again.
Between Corel's, staff work and the gun of doom that Kay was wielding
Saved you guys more than a couple
sets
times.
sets when you positively absolutely have to set a room on fire,
Call KO.
accept no substitutes.
I just remember at the end of that fight, that thing coming down and its head slamming into the ground right at Tazi's feet, and Tazi just kind of standing there trembling.
I would too.
At least you didn't get hit.
One of the few times he had wished that flight suit had not had the internal fluid tanks converted to hold golden drink.
Yeah.
Which we did not hear about that till later.
Yeah.
You guys did kill it. You guys began traveling a little deeper into the cave. That's when Corel fell to her knees. She started screaming. Ko could feel the fear that was coming from Corel, and all that Corel could see was 2 brown eyes and a voice that just simply said, "Come to me, child."
And that's where we ended up on episode 113, coming right into episode 114, where she kind of came to her senses and said, "Something's waiting for us. Let's go." And KO said, "Something's down there. Let's go back." There was a bit of an argument, which led to Corel arguing while walking backwards through the tunnel, trying to draw everybody into the room.
Yep.
Guess what? That worked.
It did work, even though you guys called me on my bullshit. You just did it anyway.
Yeah,
Yep.
And as you were backing up, A1 did make a comm call to Tazi to say, "Hey, Rafe sent some reinforcements. I got 10 of those new fancy vulture droids floating around here. I feel safe." Which made you guys all say, "What?" I'm confused even more.
And then we walked into this cavern. We passed a couple of what we now know are Magna Guards, these big droids that were carrying electrostaffs. And we were greeted by a very regal-looking, gray-haired, brown-eyed man who we recognized as Count Dooku.
Dun, dun, dun.
That's true, ladies and gentlemen. Our episode 114 is our first celebrity appearance.
Dooku actually welcomed us, seemed very unsurprised at our arrival, which, since he had sensed Corel, there was no surprise to him.
No.
And we basically said, "What's going on?" And he explained that the Yunkuri were sent by him to Rusan to test their new droid army. All he has to do is tell the Yunkuri there's a Force user here, and they're going to go try and kill it. So
He actually originally sent, and he told you guys this, he sent them to Randon to kill a senator and a Jedi. While they were there, they found out that Corel was there and that you guys were headed to Rusan, which is where he then said, "Well, let's test the army," and sent them to Rusan.
Rusan and Rafe and Tassar knew the attack was coming.
And this was all part of their larger PR campaign for the Separatists.
It was, because then he could say, look, we saved Randon, they attacked us, we drove them off, we have the superior forces, yada, yada, yada. That's part of their plan, which really hasn't come out in the story.
This is where it kind of boiled over, I think, a bit for Tazi.
Yeah, I would 100% agree.
I think Dooku kind of echoed Rafe and tried to get you guys to join again.
Yeah, he straight up asked us, so, do you want to work for us? And that was when Tazi just straight up walked up on Dooku and poked him in the chest.
I can only say that Tazi did not realize at the time the personage who he was talking to. Tazi had heard of Dooku, obviously, but had not realized who he was actually dealing with.
Carell and Ko, however, were like, what are you doing?
They were well aware. No one warned Tazi, but Tazi also did not give them time.
True.
Tazi walked up to Dooku, put his finger in his chest, and basically said, we're done with your crap, we're done with your games, leave the Krallitz Fang alone, we want nothing to do with you. And then he turned to walk away.
And Dooku's like, well, all right, we're, if you're not willing to work for us, he basically tried to talk us back around, and that's when Tazi did his second most unexpected action.
What was that?
Entire podcast. Yeah, shot Dooku. He turned around, quick drew, and just shot Dooku.
Tazi did successfully hit Dooku.
He did, but Dooku also did nothing to defend himself.
True. Unfortunately for Tazi's
his aim
weapon.
was true.
Fortunately for Tazi's weapon, Dooku then ripped it out of his hands.
Oh yeah, if you've ever seen someone crush a beer can with no effort, that's pretty much what Dooku did to Tazi's pistol.
Well, I tried grabbing it out of the air with the Force and stopping it, but yeah, that was not really effective. So it did get crumpled and crushed into the...
At that point, Dooku said, we're done.
Get
Please
out.
Leave.
And he Force pushed us all down the hallway.
Pretty much.
You did. And at the same time, well, not the same time.
We headed back to the speeders at that point.
You guys were headed
Going,
back to the speeders.
Hey, at least we're alive.
Which, at that point, the camera shifted over to A1, who, if you guys have learned, if you leave A1 alone, he gets bored.
We haven't learned that.
I wouldn't say bored.
Apparently not.
He wants to do something, and he decided to start playing around with the communications. He sliced into the transmission, and he was just trying to figure out what the droids were saying, these ships. But instead, somehow he ended up intercepting a communication between Dooku and Tassar, where Dooku basically said, I'm done with the Krallitz Fang, you're done with them, the Duro shot me, if I can't have this one, I want the other one. Which A1 didn't completely understand that, but he noticed that Tassar didn't want to say anything to begin with, but Dooku said, you and Rafe have an agreement, Rafe works for me, therefore I want to know where she is, and that's when the communication basically cut out.
We came back on the speeders and, headed back. Unfortunately, A1 didn't bother telling us about this transmission, not for a very long time at that point.
Well, in his defense, he didn't understand the importance of it, and there was part of him that was nervous that he would
You'll
get
notice
in trouble.
Chris says in A1's defense quite a lot.
Yeah, that does happen a lot. However, we get buttoned up, get ready to leave, and Tazi has been quiet the whole ride back. And Carell actually heads up to the cockpit where he's sitting, and he's just staring at a flask in his hand. You said it was covered with Derosian script, right?
That's correct. It was a flask that Tazi had actually gotten from a compartment on the ship.
His father's flask.
Yeah, it was left actually in a compartment under the dash in the cockpit, under the control console. So on the flask was a list of names in Derosian, and it was basically a hand-me-down flask to the family, so you could see generations of the different Derosians who had it, and then my father's name was the last on the flask.
Carell was actually very startled then because Tazi said, why don't you plot us a course? Told her and A1 to take them out as he went back to his quarters that he doesn't normally sleep in.
Well, there was also a really nice moment there where Carell noticed Tazi and tried to give him her pistol.
Oh, yeah.
And Tazi kind of put his hand on hers, and that was, I think, really a nice little scene right there.
That was
you guys kind of connected a little bit.
That was a good connection moment for Carell and Tazi.
Carell, well, she felt a little responsible because she couldn't save Tazi's gun. So, and she actually thought that that's what he was upset about, and thought that would help. not quite realizing the depth of what
Right.
was going on.
This was another big episode for me as a listener. You guys, I think, took it to another level. That whole thing with Tazi and Dooku, that blew me away. I did not see that coming at all.
None of us did.
And I was, yeah,
Neither did I.
I did.
When he did that, we're all like, "What?
yeah.
We are so dead."
That was a really, I think, a great scene. That whole last part, that whole last half of that episode was just amazing.
This episode also gave, as a player, it gave me an opportunity to pull back to Tazi's reasoning for being on the ship in the first place, and kind of the familial part of this, because unfortunately for my character and for me as a player, most of the stuff regarding my character's backstory happened on the episode that no one will ever hear. So a lot of the story we'd been able to tell had been about Corell and had been more about KO. And the flask piece, and there's a journal that comes up in a later episode as well, like a kind of a logbook. Those are pieces that allow Tazi to harken back to the reasons he's on the ship, the reasons that KO and Corell are even here in the first place, like this kind of thing that happened, and the repercussions of all these things that are happening. Basically, the character went from having no ship to having a ship to having a ship that was used by slavers, and in trying to clear his name ends up just being a pawn in everyone else's game, much like he felt his father was before him, and repeating the mistakes of your parents. Deeper character drama, those types of things. So it was a good episode. It was a good as a player, it was a good experience for me, but then also the way Kendall played Corell, and the way Corell came in at the end and kind of and bridged that gap between player and character to kind of reach out with Corell. And again, with all of the kind of conflict that has been going on in the few past episodes, it was really a really nice moment between the two characters, and it was really, I got to give Kendall credit, it was really well done. I didn't anticipate that at all. That was something that just kind of happened in the play.
There was so much introspection, and at the table we could actually kind of feel almost depression coming off of Mike where he was playing Tazi. So it really lent itself well to a warm moment, which we'll screw up again here in the very next episode. At the beginning of the very next episode, we'll get to that in just a second.
Yeah.
But he headed off to his quarters. Told us to take his ship out, which we did. Mm-hmm. We didn't run into anything, but Corell and KO then had a little bit of a discussion about, we're worried, everybody's worried about him. He's not acting normal. And we just kind of left it there as we headed on towards Tula. A couple days later, we came out of hyperspace.
You guys got to Tula? You landed? You met your first whipped?
We got in our winter jammies first.
You did. You had to put on all that survival gear.
I got some cool goggles with giant eyes.
It's true.
That apparently you said were impossible to find way back however many episodes ago.
They were hard to find, yeah. We had Stellar eBay, there were only 2 sellers. I mean,
you guys realized that you had to buy a speed, or you didn't have to buy a speeder, you needed a speeder to get out to where you were.
Tazi haggled an amazing deal, and we ended up getting a speeder, which, only works in cold weather.
Hey, why rent when you can buy?
It's true. I can modify it later. We just don't go to Tatooine. It will overheat, and we will have nowhere to go.
You guys were told by several people, get a guide, because it's rough out here, and people didn't want to say necessarily you're city slickers and you'll die out in the cold, but that was kind of the general undertone. You guys decided to go to a bar. I believe you called it the Cold Front.
The cold front was one of them.
Originality strikes again.
Because, this was another moment where you guys said, hey, let's go to a bar, when I wasn't expecting it. So I said, sure, what's it look like? And you guys created a cool bar.
Imagine the Fortress of Solitude that serves alcohol.
Inside of an airplane hangar, exactly.
Inside of an airplane hangar.
Yeah. That's where we met a whippet named Dorn, and we hired him as our guide. He gave me like a shopping list because we wanted to leave soon, and Corell walked out to go get supplies while the boys were having a drink. So she missed the very next conversation, which...
Luckily, she missed the very next conversation.
Well, this episode ends by a whippet just very calmly walking up to KO and basically saying, how much for your slave? And he said, say what? Basically, and the episode ended.
Which brings us into episode 115, where...
we pick right back up at that very scene.
Fight number 2.
Right back up. Hey, don't give it away.
Sorry.
Some people haven't heard them yet.
We are doing a recap of all the episodes, aren't we?
I know, that's what we're doing. That's what this is. Hey, we're getting close. We're getting close.
Chris had one of my favorite lines of all time when we recapped that. It's like, she has her own pole.
Yes, that's right. Though Whippet did
thought
say that.
In his mind, the only Twi'leks he's met.
Wait, are you
the-
defending the Whippet now?
Yes.
In his defense,
He only thing he saw was Twi'lek dancers. KO didn't react too calmly to that question.
No, not at all. Tazi tried his best to keep KO from doing something he would regret, but Tazi apparently is very bad at persuasion. I can blame the dice all I want to, but at the end of the day, Tazi failed to keep KO calm.
well, and you knocked Hot Calf into his lap.
That was really, I wasn't going to mention that, but yes, in the process of trying to keep KO calm, Tazi dumped a hot drink in his crotch.
Were you going to mention that Tazi then stood up and proceeded to intercept KO's fist with his
You
face?
say intercept, I say
Cradle?
tried to save the day. Tazi really tried to get ahead of KO's punch.
He got a head in the way.
Yeah.
From the dice standpoint, because we should stand up for the dice every once in a while. KO
In the defense
missed.
of the dice.
KO missed
Wasn't me this time.
and punched Tazi in the face.
And broke my fancy goggles.
And you went down on the floor like a sack of hydro spanners.
Tazi's roughly 100 pounds soaking wet. KO is a fairly muscular, fairly well-built former army, security, military, whatever he did.
Well, and that big burly guy proceeded to beat up this poor Whippet, to be honest with you. He was trying to get
Poor
out of the
Whippet.
situation.
He's like 8.5 feet tall, 500 pounds.
More than that, but
And KO beat the snot out of him.
he was backing up going, hey, I don't want to fight. And he got beat up. Speaking of poor Whippet, once Corell returned,
Hey, I didn't know any of this. I was across the street buying supplies, and then I did something nice, and I went and bought Tazi a replacement blaster. Partially because then I'd get my blaster back, but also to be nice. So I came back and handed Tazi this plain brown
No,
box.
you woke Tazi up first.
Yeah, because
You picked him up off the ground and right
It's
at the
true.
table.
It's like,
A1
what the
picked you
hell's
up.
going on? You guys were, like the tables turned over and everything, and Carl hands you the box. It's like, what's going on? And A1 then goes, oh, it was great. He defended your honor.
see, I will tell you,
Yeah.
Accused Carell.
I will tell you, this scene actually was one of my favorite parts to play A1 because I got to really watch Nate's reactions playing KO. Because first A1 wakes Tazi up. Tazi says, what happened? And A1 just
I know,
bluntly says, KO punched you. And as a player, Nate's like, what?
Well, the best part was you told A1 goes, oh, I'll tell him what happened. And KO's like, all right, you make up the story. And A1 just straight out says, you got punched in the head, Captain.
And then when Corell comes back in and A1's like, I got this one. KO's like, no. He's like, I got it. He defended your honor and it was glorious. There was 10 of them and tried to make this grand story up. But A1's not a storyteller, so it was obviously a bunch of BS.
And then it finally came to light that the Whip had offered to buy Carell as a slave.
Tazi, not one of the best decisions he made, but again, Tazi was still a little bit woozy from getting clocked in the face.
But you weren't so woozy to have your reaction time was great because Carell immediately turned and was storming over to where the Whippet was being picked up by his friends and had a foot back about to kick him in the ribs.
And then Tazi summoned up what we have now come to refer to as Tazi's dad voice.
Dad voice.
A combination of dad voice and a wonderful dice roll allowed me to at least stop you from pummeling that poor Whippet to death.
It's true, and Carell was so mad about that. And one of my favorite lines from this episode is, "It's like you're trying to kick him when he's down. It's like that's the best time to kick him."
Yes, that was one of
She was
Carell's better lines
so
in the recent
mad.
episodes.
Letting her dark side shine through a little bit.
And she ended up just storming off and slammed the door to the bar
Which was shocking to all of us.
because really
No.
to the patrons maybe, and ended up sitting in the speeder and waiting for everybody else.
Carell is very, very good at storming off and slamming things.
Absolutely. You guys loaded up the speeder after that. You guys headed out towards the temple, which you guys had
And A1 continued to try
Yes.
and talk or bridge this confusion gap between what KO was really doing and defending Carell's honor, and it was a great thing to do, and Carell was having none of it.
Didn't Tazi also buy Carell a new blaster at that point to
Yes.
try and make amends a little bit?
That's true. You
Tazi
did
did.
run down the street.
Yeah, Tazi well, he had to get another set of goggles. So Tazi went back down the street to the supplier and picked up another pair of goggles, but in the process also got a replacement blaster for you. So Tazi did not give you your gun back. Tazi gave you a replacement that was exactly like the gun you had, except it had a
Slightly
little more
power.
kick. Yeah.
Yep.
And that was his way of saying thank you for the nicety that you had given him on the ship.
And that calmed things down a little bit on the speeder ride.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Which, second day of the speeder ride, you guys get attacked by the snow demons, which you guys very handily got rid of them.
No, there was a lot of driving around and people hanging out of windows. That happened a lot.
And damaged doors.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that was
we
easy
didn't
to
really
fix.
get hit much. So it
The
was.
speeder took a little bit of a beating.
It did, but it soldiered on nicely.
Corel did explain to everybody that the closer they get to their goal, the temple, the more raw energy from the force she feels and the more, quote, white noise she could feel.
It was really distracting. So she found herself just kind of like staring into space occasionally and just missing bits of the conversation, which didn't help A1, who was still trying to convince her that KO had stood up for her honor.
Well, actually, at one point, A1 was told that the KO Corel love thing wouldn't work. So I believe he said, "Hey, Tazi, did you see?" And I think that's when it was told that's not going to happen either. So A1's now a little
Yeah.
lost as to who he's going to hook KO up with because that's one of his side goals. You guys did make it to the temple.
There was a lot of complaints, though. Tazi and KO spent a lot of time complaining about the cold. Tazi mostly because he kept on, "I'm so cold." It's like, okay, you have a heater.
But Tazi didn't know that, and Tazi is also,
You
again,
didn't-
100 pounds.
You didn't read the manual.
I didn't get a manual.
You could have downloaded one off the HoloNet.
Anyway.
Could ask A1 to print one up.
And that's also, unfortunately, when we found out
Coulda,
about
woulda,
his...
shoulda.
That's when we found out about his reuse of the waste reclamation system in his suit.
Hey, Tazi's not an engineer, but he did see a very good opportunity staring him in the face. Actually, at about mouth level.
We ended up having this argument almost all the way to the steps of the temple where we had to break a lot of ice to get into it. Took a couple hours, I believe. We ended up getting inside and resting, but
I think KO cut down a lot of that time with a bit of the use of super flamethrower.
He tried, but he would have ran out of fire beforehand. We ended up getting into the building, and Corel was even more distracted because there was just so much potential energy in the air.
And I mean, that hall was filled with, the remains of what appeared to be a giant battle, blaster fire, and what Corel would note that there were, and KO also, there were obvious lightsaber cuts into the floors and walls. And
Yep, you guys noticed that there were blaster shots going in and lightsabers defending. So
and even the main double doors had been blown off their hinges at that point.
And that led us to episode 116, or 116.
Which led back into more complaints from Tazi because he turned off his heater again. Hey, we complained about your complaining, but that's when we figured out your ulterior motive.
yes, which was that the golden drink is much better when it's cold. And turning the heater in the suit on heats up the drink. I mean,
And if you die of hypothermia,
no one wants to drink warm drinks. Nobody likes room temperature
paradox.
stuff.
We decided to let that be and found that A1 was standing in a corner waving at a deactivated camera. There were quite a few of them lying around, actually, but there's no power in any of the building, or in any of the buildings that we could find.
That's when KO hears the first time of the "Help me" voice. And he heard that a few times.
Only he heard that, though.
Only he was the...
Well, A1 also heard it.
Not yet.
Not yet. It was just...
Yeah, it started out with just KO having that experience. And then I think a few minutes later, Tazi saw a shadow moving that no one else saw. But again, it was very indistinct. It was just like shadow.
There was even one part, you saw the shadow and you actually cracked off a blaster shot into one of the corners.
I did.
Which freaked the rest of us.
Tazi did.
Oh, yeah.
I honestly believe 116 is our best episode because there were little bits of humor, very little bits of humor, but there was a lot of suspense.
There was a bit of
we were going through a haunted temple.
Exactly. There was a bit of that suspense, a bit of that darkness. As we were trying to figure this out, and a lot of our adventures in the past, a lot of the episodes we'd had dealt with pretty direct threats. We had people were attacking us directly, or like a bar fight, or these types of things. This was the first time where a lot of the stuff we were dealing with was kind of was incorporeal. It was
tenuous.
It was tenuous. It was perception based. It was not a physical threat that was standing in front of us that we could do anything about.
Right.
And that trickled through the entire episode. It was fun. fun to play for sure.
Absolutely. That led the group to really talking to Corell about where they are, why are they there. Corell explained that this is a temple that was used in the past by Force users that were neither Jedi nor Sith. They were believed in the unifying Force theory. Sometimes they called themselves the Potentium Force users, and that she was looking for records and materials that might help her find a lightsaber crystal.
So once we got everything powered up, we started looking through the records on the computer stuff in the power area, and we actually found I think it was A1, found a recording of Republic forces storming the front doors, and they were led by a pair of lightsaber-wielding Jedi, one of which looked like a very young Count Dooku, and the other one was kind of long hair, a little bit of a beard. We couldn't figure out who he was, though.
Literally tried for
Yeah,
hours
yeah.
to try and figure out who this person was.
And it wasn't a very young Dooku. It was, he was still probably in his early 50s. Because when you guys met him, he was in
Compared
his
to
early
us,
70s.
compared to now, though. I mean,
Yeah, it was about 20 years before.
You know, A1 and Tazi had gone and done a little bit of exploring too, I believe, in some of the personnel areas, the quarter areas.
Yeah, we split the party at that.
Yeah, we did. We split the party. Bad idea. And in the process of that, Tazi found a room that A1 had noted there was a hidden compartment in. In trying to open the hidden compartment, Tazi, again, not doing the best with his slim, slender fingers, triggered what appears to be some kind of trap that then fried out A1 and left him completely unharmed.
It roached a little bit of his memory. He didn't remember anything since basically we had left Kashyyyk, I believe.
He lost a couple days of memory, but he also...
Roughly 7 episodes.
he also, as a extra benefit to it, he was then able to hear the same voice that Ko was hearing. Not just that voice, but other voices.
Indeed. Again, unbeknownst to Tazi at the time, Tazi was able to get the compartment open after shocking out A1. And upon opening the compartment and seeing some of the pictures in the room, he realized that the room actually belonged to Tassar. The pictures that he found appeared to be of Tassar with a male and then also what appeared to be possibly her child. The compartment for the lightsabers also contained 3 lightsaber indentations, 2 regular sized and 1 that would have been possibly for a child-sized lightsaber. Tazi took the picture, folded it up for Corell for later
But kept the frame to sell.
Yeah, I did. Tazi's was going through the rooms to try and find things to sell because he's a pragmatist, and this ruin was possibly filled with things that might be worth money.
Corell and Ko, however, had gone upstairs to the They had rechecked the main floor, the kitchens, didn't find anything. They did find a shattered lightsaber at one point. Corell actually questioned whether or not that the voices were coming from the lightsaber, going so far as to shake it next to Ko's tentacles, but he didn't feel anything except a little bit of disdain at that point. So they ended up going to the security room on the main floor, which then were joined by A1 and Tazi right shortly thereafter. Right outside the security room door, though, there was this large blast door that was ice encrusted. We couldn't get it open without a lot of work, so we kind of bypassed it for the moment. We found more video in the security room, and this video showed the exact same video as before, but there was more to it, including the fact that at the back of the Republic forces, a young Senator Rafe was the one giving commands to the Jedi and the Republic forces. The video feed also showed those same Jedis, but again, we weren't able to figure out who the second Jedi was.
I'm going to be honest. This amused me because you guys tried every possible way to identify this guy. And I just was
Lightsaber
like,
builds.
yeah,
Roles got more and more obscure.
and it just entertained me because I was like, I know as players, I've described this very tall, skinny,
And we knew
bearded
who he
guy,
was.
long hair, obviously the apprentice to Dooku. And I'll roll. Nope, I didn't get it. Eventually, you guys did.
Well,
We've never actually, we had not tried for a piece of information that hard through this entire production.
Ko, though, got really frustrated with us going through the same video over and over again, so he wandered out into the hall and looked at the blast door and said, I have a flamethrower. This is ice. I got this, no problem. So he blasted it open.
Now, to be clear, Ko was getting frustrated by not being able to figure out who this person was, but Ko also continued to hear voices saying, "Hey, come here, come out to this doorway.
They
Look
did
at
not,
this."
however, sound like Kermit the Frog.
They did not.
It was more like,
Is it me you're looking for?
Exactly. he actually got enough of the ice melted that he opened the door, and inside he saw something reflecting light like a little star almost in a shadowy female form.
When that door opened, I mean, literally, it's a wall of ice to the outside.
Oh, yeah, multiple feet thick.
And so light is just shining through this wall, and you know, I think in his own words, like he said, he saw what appeared to be like a star shining in the middle of this ice wall.
And that's when he heard the voice say, "Not you, go get her." And then he's like, no. And he closed the door.
Yeah, in typical KO fashion. It's like, not me. Cool. Shuts the door.
That didn't happen.
It's not for me. It's for you.
At that point, you found the second video with Tassar.
So that second video that we found showed Tassar defending some younglings with her own saber, and you know, obviously to no avail. The battle was going against them. So she gets confronted by Dooku and Rafe and this again unknown Jedi that we were so unable to identify.
We tried again at this point.
We did try again.
Why is the lightsaber constantly in front of his face?
There's a confrontation there between the two of them. You can see them kind of arguing back and forth, but the video feed did not have audio. Luckily, Tazi could read lips, or remembered that he could read lips, and the dice were with him, and he was able to make out their conversation. The narrative there is that Tassar agreed to surrender and be Rafe's assistant if the younglings were spared. The mystery Jedi, the shadowy figure.
She agreed, though. And then
Yeah. She did agree. That mystery Jedi offered to take the kids back to Coruscant to teach them the correct path, but there's also some implied statements that some of the kids were too old or could not be trained.
There was no implied. It was straight up said, actually.
Yeah. Again, Tazi read the lips.
That's true.
Tazi was the one to try to explain it to everybody.
Right about that point, KO making a last-ditch effort to say, hey, I fought with a bunch of Jedi. Maybe I recognize his style. Finally remembers at the same time A1 does that this is Qui-Gon Jinn, apprentice to Count Dooku.
Da-da-da-da. So KO reveals what he learned about the door outside as well in our conversation, and Corell immediately heads out to open that door.
Well, I mean, go get her. I mean, hello. So she sees the figure and finally hears that voice, and then everything goes black for her. She feels like she's falling and tumbling into darkness, and then she finally looks up, and the shadowy figure is kind of subtly glowing, and she hears her master say, "Hello, Padawan." And that's when the episode ends, but outside, Tazi sees her just collapse to the floor.
Mm-hmm. That leads us into our most recent episode 117.
Corell actually has a long discussion with her former master at this point about the nature of Force. She kind of is being asked, what are you doing here? And she prevaricates and kind of hems and haws a lot about it because she doesn't want to give a straight answer.
Big word.
Thank you. I got to use defenestrate earlier too.
I know. I heard that. I was impressed.
Was it because I thought it kind of was because she didn't know what she wanted at that point?
Well, Corell doesn't still kind of know what she wants. The interesting thing about the background behind this is the person who plays Master Dane is my good friend Chris Berger. And when we role played this, we just knew a general idea what was going to go on. And I just said, play the character. Whatever you're going to say, you're going to say. And there were 3 times during this conversation that she actually stunned me out of character with these questions. The last question being basically was her saying, hey, you're taking the easy path. What are your intentions here? And then she says, are you choosing a form of power or are you choosing to be a Jedi? And that actually stopped me as a player. And I'm like, that's such a good question. She goes, okay, I know how to end this. And it's just, Corell, wake up. And then Corell wakes up to find out that the boys had been standing over her trying to wake her up. And she just kind of was laying there twitching like a dog having a bad dream.
Of course, she opened her hand and a lightsaber crystal fell out of her hand.
Which was a little creepy.
A little confusing. And they noticed that little star was no longer there in the ice.
And once Corell kind of looked at it, she just said, I think we can go now.
This actually led to kind of a neat conversation and something that we can build on later. There was a long discussion about setting up a base in this abandoned temple.
That it's funny that you mentioned that, or it's funny that became a topic because, for the longest time we've kind of used the Kralsfang as our base of operations. And, through the course of these adventures, that's kind of what we've done. But then we, realized that we basically had this empty temple to ourselves out in the middle of pretty much nowhere on the edge of separatist space. there's a lot of benefits and some possible downsides. But, that led us into a long discussion of like, do we want to settle down in this place? Is there a benefit or should we continue to stay on the move?
From there, Corel goes off on her own.
Yeah, and I think Tazi and Ko start like really kind of looking into like, okay, can this place support? Like, do we have the infrastructure available? Do we have the power source? Do we have resources to be able to do this?
Because
Doing a landing field.
Yeah, exactly.
You tried to take you were working on taking A1 and KO to go look at the antenna to see if you can get hooked up to the HoloNet.
Corel had set up some like exercise mats in front as a seat in front of the meditation crystals, and A1, being A1, wanted to spy on her.
You guys didn't let him.
No,
he didn't get to see it.
No, he did not get to watch the magic.
No, he had to go fix the antenna.
Then Corel actually did spend some time in meditation, and just as she was about to build her lightsaber, a pair of glowy, ghostly hands interposed her over the lightsaber pieces. So they have a bit of discussion with Master Dane about she's taking a shortcut. Are you sure this is the correct path? And Corel basically reiterated that it may be the wrong choice, but it was her choice to make. As she slots the crystal and seals the lightsaber, her master vanished from her sight. Corel looked around and activated the lightsaber, revealing a very brilliant violet lightsaber blade.
We, and Ko and Tazi, I think we had seen as much as we could about the base at that time. We'd have to make some bigger decisions as we headed out back toward the speeders so we can get back to the ship. In the hallway, as we kind of shut the place down, conserve some power, we head back out that tunnel, and there we find our guide Dorn, wounded pretty badly in the hallway.
And we asked him, Ko revived him and said, what's going on? It's like, well, the Whippids that you fought in the bar fight, they came back after you. I was getting ready to leave, and A1 kind of pointed out, well, why are you getting ready to leave? It's like, well, it's been 2 days.
Yeah, it was A1 checked his internal chronometer, and he was like, it has not been 2 days, it's been like 14 hours.
Yeah.
Which, can you really trust a droid that's memory's been wiped out?
Just saying. Just saying.
That's true.
We were all under the impression we were in there for a lot less time than we actually were.
But at the end of the tunnel, we discovered a crude booby trap set up. A frag grenade had been set up with a tripwire. Mm-hmm. We disarmed that, and that's when we also noticed that there were Whippids lying in wait for us. Tazi then whipped out his gun, and with a triumph...
My brand new blaster that I had not even had a chance to use yet, really.
You pegged the sniper across the way.
I did not take the sniper down, but Tazi did do a significant amount of damage with that first shot.
Yep. And then KO took a hit from the sniper rifle.
A couple of Whippets dropped down from the ledge right above the hallway.
That was a very bad mistake on their part, because Corel ignited her lightsaber, and for the very first attack roll, the very first use of a lightsaber in our game, I got a triumph.
Well, in their defense, they didn't know you had a lightsaber.
So, one of them got their truncheon cut in half. One of them lost an arm. KO barbecued 2 of them.
One of them tried to run away and got stabbed in the back.
I told him to surrender, and he turned around. So, Corel rather angrily ran him through.
I believe at that point KO activated his firepower and burned down two of the Whippets there, and I think Tazi ended the fight with the last shot on that sniper.
Yeah, you guys gathered up the sniper weapon and kind of threw the Whippets aside and loaded up the vehicle, and then you turn around and notice that Corel was just staring at the guy she stabbed in the back, and they ended up kind of getting her into the vehicle, whereupon A1 wouldn't get in the vehicle until somebody else got in first. We don't know who that was. It was he.
He said he.
Yeah, we don't know who it was. He's seeing things.
He was still talking.
Side note to that combat with the first real lightsaber fight. In character, Tazi was Tazi was distracted, I think, for a couple rounds in the fight because of how amazing the lightsaber combat was. Obviously, the triumph was a big success, and we were all really excited about that. But as a character, Tazi has never really seen a Jedi fight before, and if you've never seen that, it's very easy, even in the midst of a combat like that, to become 100% distracted. It was quite a sight to see. Character-wise, he was quite impressed.
Well, Corel is also, as had been discussed earlier in the episode, she had studied Ceresu, which is much more of a defensive form. So when that guy came in with a truncheon, she basically parried it, and cut it in half. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of blade work being done to kind of get the attention.
Looking forward to more lightsaber combat.
We'll see.
You guys jumped in the speeder, headed back.
Tazi and KO shared a soft longing. Oh, no, it was a worried.
Worried. We were worried. We were concerned.
Carl didn't notice that.
There is nobody out there is shipping Tazi and KO. I can guarantee it.
We have plenty of listeners. I'm sure somebody's doing it.
Nobody's shipping it.
When you guys,
Jacob is going to confirm for us that nobody is shipping Tazi and KO.
Silence.
If you are, please post it to Redemption Pod on Twitter.
Fifth Amendment. Once you guys get back to the town, you guys found that somebody tried to break into the ship. That made Corell rather upset.
Yeah, somebody had damaged the ship while trying to break into it, and to the point where Corell had started getting angry at her tools and everything else. There was a lot of swearing going on when Tazi ran off to find out what had gone on.
That's when Tazi saw Corell toss like a giant hull plate across the landing bay. And then he left because he was like, I'm going to give her some time to calm down.
Yeah, she was upset.
Tazi went across the street actually to the local constabulary to try to find out who had done the break-ins. It turns out they'd already been captured. To which then Tazi, I guess somewhat effectively, mostly ineffectively, stared down these young hooligans and tried to give them kind of a, bad things will happen if you keep this up. Just turn your lives around type of thing. And
It's just a couple teenagers
Yeah.
trying to have fun.
again, Tazi tried to kind of play this intimidating character, and unfortunately, I feel like
You have pulled it
I
off.
feel like that was kind of not necessarily his most shining moment with that.
You do a lot better when it's kind of a surprise, like Kratos and Dooku.
Yes,
So.
Yeah.
You do better when there's the actual fear you might die.
Yeah.
Good point. Not when they're in a cage.
I mean, a tall, skinny guy trying to stare down two like relatively oversized whiffids.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was not impressively scary to them at all. So Tazi left there feeling like he had done at least some kind of, left an impression on these youngsters. But then as we got back to the ship received a message from the Harlequin, a ship we had heard of but never had previous contact with.
We had heard of it in episode -1, the audio that nobody's ever heard.
Yeah.
It was mentioned a few more times.
Let's just
afterwards.
call that the lost episode.
The lost episode. There we go. I like that. It was also mentioned when we were doing our research on Master Rays and the Domino. So we mentioned the Harlequin was mentioned there as well.
Yeah.
Basically, the message was Jenna and Tara had been kidnapped. Unfortunately, in the kidnapping process, Jenny, the Wookiee, she was killed. But she did defend the child with her last breath. The Harlequin was actually hired, since it's a group of bounty hunters, they were hired to rescue the girl. Jana was actually still on the planet, and the crew was asked to come back to Kashyyyk because they had some information for Tazi.
Now, just a point about this episode, one of the things that was really interesting about this one, and one of the things that we've talked about doing in the past and in the near future, is that at a recent convention in February, Chris ran a game of Edge of the Empire for a group of people there. And when he ran the game, he informed that group that the adventure they would be going on would actually be having a direct impact on our podcast. It would be a tie-in, a side story that would tie into our main story. In fact, Jacob, our guest here today, was actually part of that storyline as well, in the fact that he came in to assist us with some of the voicing of those characters after the fact.
And we got Jeff and Andy actually were at the convention and played in that story, which was the story of the Harlequin rescuing Tara and getting her back to Kashyyyk. They both actually are going to be guest starring on that episode as well.
All three of them, Jacob too. Yeah, so that is actually our next episode that leads off season 2. So thanks, guys. I appreciate you all taking time to help me with this recap. Hoping that for new listeners, that gives them a good feel of what we did before and what we're going to do in the future. You should go back and listen.
If you decided to nap during this, congratulations. You've gotten yourself a good hour and a half to 2 hours of sleep.
Now go back and listen to all the episodes for real.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to go because you missed some amazing role play.
Yeah, and season 2, we're all excited about it. We've gotten the audio issues fixed. We've clarified a couple rules, things that we're going to change and work with a little better. And we've already got some really awesome established characters and an awesome story going. So I'm excited.
I can't wait for the next episode.
You got me hooked.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.